You're listening to Trek FM.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
There was a little bar in Mill Valley where all the Starfleet trainees used to go.
The 602 Club.
You know it?
I was there more times than I can remember.
I've sewn you up, I've set your bones, but I won't bury you. I've buried enough members of the Wayne family.
You leave me?
You see only one end to your journey. Leaving is all I have to make you understand. You're not Batman anymore. You have to find another way. You used to talk about finishing, about a life beyond that awful cave.
Alfred, Rachel died knowing that we had decided to be together. That was my life beyond the cave. I can't just move on. She didn't. She couldn't.
What if she had?
I can't change that.
What if before she died, she wrote a letter saying she chose Harvey Dent over you? And what if, to spare you pain, I burnt that letter?
How dare you use Rachel to try to stop me?
I am using the truth, Master Wayne. Maybe it's time we all stop trying to outsmart the truth and let it have its day.
Welcome, everyone, to the 602 Club. We are back, Trek FM's dedicated General Geek Show. I'm so excited to be here tonight because we are finishing up what I think could be argued to be the best cinema trilogy of all time. And I say that as a Star Wars fan, but Star Wars now has 7 films, so it's not a trilogy anymore. So get off my back, fans. So I'm so excited to be here to talk about The Dark Knight Rises with some incredible gentlemen who I will introduce to you in a moment, but I think you know who's here. Just remember, of course, you can find all of the Trek FM shows that we are a part of on iTunes.com/TrekFM. We're a featured provider there on iTunes. Very pleased to be that. While you're there, John, what should they do if they are on iTunes?
Well, surprise, I'm here. And I would say that what they should do is they should go ahead and give a star rating and a review for the 602 Club. Let Matt know what you think of this fine program that he releases for you on a weekly basis. And, those reviews, they really help people find the show and help spread the word of the 602 Club and help its continuing mission to spread a positive point of view on film.
I like that. I really like that. A more positive point of view. Tristan, they can find us all over the place too. We're on like Twitter and Facebook. Where should they go if they want to, maybe hit us up with some conversation?
Well, I think the best way to get a hold of you and all of us is on Facebook.com/TrekFM, as well as within the Babel Conference, which you can find on Trek.fm and on Facebook. It's a closed Facebook group, but if you ask to be invited, you most likely will be.
We're all over Twitter at TrekFM, so all the places you can find us. And, of course, you can leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/TrekFM, and you can contact the show through email. Just go to trek.fm/contact, choose a show, choose the 602 Club. It'll come to me. I'll feed it on to the hosts, and we'll be able to talk about whatever it is that you have sent in, which, you know what? If we get some more emails, some questions, we could possibly do a mailbag supplemental, so send them on in. I love getting emails. Well, guys, we're here for one reason, and one reason only, is because A Dark Knight rose, and we're here to talk about it. And there's no better place to start than, I think, like we did the last time, which is the opening. Because if you thought the last opening was good, I don't know, did they top it?
I will say that they at least matched it, because that opening of The Dark Knight made a huge impression in setting up the Joker's character, and I think that that Bane's setup in the prologue sequence was pretty fantastic, and I think that seeing it, I mean, again, the first time I saw it in IMAX, and it basically like stunned the audience into submission. Better is such a subjective term. I think that in terms of setting up the character and the anticipation of what was to come over the next 2+ hours, I think it matched that at the very least.
I agree with you, John, where in regards of setting up the character, it did its job. Whether it did it better or not is immaterial, I think, in this perspective, because it established the tone, it established the look, and it told you exactly who Bane is and what he's willing to do and what depths he's willing to go in order to achieve his mission or his plan. And I think that's the only way that you can really look at it, at least from my own perspective, is did it accomplish its goal? Did Chris Nolan accomplish his goal? And the answer is yes.
I think, to me, the thing that just really, especially in the rewatch that I had over the weekend, the scene where he's just hanging by one arm, as the plane is upside down, and he is just this hulking mass, and everything about him, there's this utter confidence in all that they're doing. He's not scared, he owns that scene from the moment they pull the hood off of him. And I think really setting himself apart in a good way from the Joker. I think that's one of the things that you get here, is he's very different than that type of villain that we had before. And I think this scene is just, the masterful thing about it is the whole thing feels as real as possible. Like, and never in my mind any part think, oh, well, that looks fake.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point to make. It really is, because there are a lot of filmmakers that would have relied on the CG cheat to make this scene happen. And Nolan instead did it with an IMAX camera and with, I mean, even though I hate the way the term is overused and everything, but practical effects. Like, it was real skydivers, and it was a real, beat up plane set that wasn't flying, but at the very least they shot it so that they had consistent lighting, and it, you knew they were in a real plane fuselage. And so it very much allowed you, especially, in the IMAX format, to buy it, to get into it. They could not have, I don't think that opening works if they take a single fake sky background or anything like that, and of course I'm sure I'm going to get like, oh no, they did that in one shot. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it was very important to do this as realistically as possible. And I think that's what helps sell it.
Nolan knows how to use the camera. That's the thing, is that you can get one of the most expensive cameras in the world. You can get one of the most advanced cameras in the world, but that doesn't mean you know how to use it. And I think I was I don't want to criticize too horribly pioneers of the work of others, but I remember when they said that, like Adele's new music video is the first music video to be shot on IMAX, and then you watch it and you're like, why the hell was this shot on IMAX? It's all just close-ups of her face, and it's just her standing in a meadow, and it's all medium shots. You're like, what? Why is this happening? Like, and it's, I'm not trying to compare Adele to The Dark Knight Rises. What I'm trying to say is that when you watch this, you can tell it's mastercraft.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I think that I really like about the scene, too, is the way in which the music immediately inserts itself here, and that driving sound. And it creates the momentum for Bane and his men. And it's all working together perfectly to create and craft, I think, just a masterful opening to a film that, like you said, John, I think is exactly the way it should be described. It beats you into submission so that the rest of the movie you're just kind of glued to everything that's happening, because if that's the opening, what's going to happen next? And it's the same way that I think they were able to do the same thing that they did in The Dark Knight, which is create an opening that makes you go, holy how are they going to top that? They did the same thing here, and I think it really works. And so everything working together here, and like you said, Tristan, Nolan knowing exactly how to use the camera, where to put it, where to place it, just the right amount of I think sound effects and everything about this works. And I also like the way that the action is telling the story. None of it is choreographed for the audience. You have to be paying attention to what's going on, or you're not going to get that they are stealing the blood from the real scientist so that when the plane crashes, they think that scientist is actually dead because all they'll find is the DNA. But he's not. But they're not, there's nothing being soft pedaled to the audience here. You need to be paying attention to the action because for Nolan, action isn't just to blow your mind, it's also to tell the story. And that's always the way that I think really action should be if you do it right. And Nolan is a master at that craft, I think, and it really shows up in this scene because no frame is wasted in this moment.
And the reaction of his followers really helped to set Bane up. It wasn't just the actions of Bane or the action around Bane. It was very much the reaction that his followers had to him. Like when he said, he's like, no, they're going to expect one of us in the crash. That follower did not hesitate. That follower did not have any change of face, did not have any worry on his face, or like have any questions or go like, are you sure? Do I have to do this? Are you sure I have to do this? It was all like, okay, yeah, I'll take off my harness. Yeah, I will die for you. No questions asked, except like, did we rise? You know, like, is the fire rising or something? What was the line again? Or
have we started a fire? No, he says, have we started a fire? Yes,
yeah.
The fire rises.
And like he puts his arm up, the fire rises.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
And what's really, I love that you point that out, Tristan, because one of the things that it also does is immediately sets up a framework that we are very much in the milieu of, even still today, of the fanatical follower, willing to do whatever it takes to carry out the plan. And this is, I think, just a continuation of some of the things that we were talking about in The Dark Knight, where Nolan has continued the story to continue to follow the history that we've had, and we're just seeing that progression again of like the even more fanatical follower, and I like it. There's so much happening right here at the beginning of the film. It's just wonderful.
I do have a question, and I think this ties into the discussion of the rest of the film and everything. Is when I saw the preview in front of MI4, Ghost Protocol, as soon as the guy said, have we started a fire? And Bane says, yes, the fire rises. I remember, and my cousin who saw it with me disagreed with me. I wasn't the only one that said, oh, he's definitely League of Shadows, right? Was I, like, I don't think I had any special insight there. Like, did you guys walk away with the same impression? Were you instantly sold, like, oh, okay, this is League of Shadows, come back? Or was that a surprise later in the film when you found out that he was, trying to fulfill Ra's al Ghul's destiny? Did this give it away for you? Did this prologue give it away for you?
I'll be honest, no. I wasn't, it didn't give it away for me, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised when they revealed it either, if that makes sense. It was just kind of like when they said that in the movie.
Right.
No, I think I'm with you, Tristan. It felt, I think when the revelation came, it just felt like a nice circular thing. We started with the League of Shadows. We're going to find our way back there. And that Batman's greatest enemy has always been this organization that continually keeps finding a way. I mean, it's like the Hydra. You keep cutting off one head, you think you've got it, and another one comes back. And so I actually just really liked it. But I think, John, you definitely had a leg up on me because I did not realize that, I don't believe, until it just was shown in the movie. But I also don't think I was probably thinking about it that deeply when I saw the trailer. I was probably too mesmerized by everything else that was going on.
Oh no, I don't think that I was unique in any way. Like it's a question that I've always just sort of like asked people because and I get sort of like a 50-50 split. So like I don't think I was unique in any way in that read, but I was just curious.
Well, and it's interesting because so we're talking about this as the opening, but there is a actual opening, which is the funeral for Harvey Dent that Gordon is speaking at. And it's a very quick scene, and then they go into this major opening, and then it shifts back to Gotham where they're having Harvey Dent Day. And we really start to come into all the stuff we talked about at last time with the implications of what I like to call the Dent-Rachel deception, because there are two different deceptions that are happening, that have happened, that are mirroring each other, and they're playing out on the personal side for Bruce, but on the larger side for Gotham, and they're showing the ways in which I think lies impact the individual and then society as a whole. And I thought this was, to me, this is the thing that I love about this film the most, is the way in which it dealt with the idea of truth and lies, and, you know, the fact that you cannot build a society based on lies, because the moment they come out, everything just blows up.
Yeah, it's interesting because I like thinking about it. Now when I go back to Dark Knight Rises, there's a specific moment, and I know it'll seem strange to tie it this way, but there's a specific moment in the Avengers where he basically lies to them and says that Coulson had these cards on him when he died, and you guys aren't acting like the heroes he thought, and you find out that he was fibbing. And it's so interesting because it's two different approaches to this idea of the lie. Because in the Avengers, they're like, well, this tiny little white lie is okay to tell because it gets everybody together. Whereas Dark Knight is saying that it doesn't. Like, do you think that Dark Knight Rises is postulating the idea that it's the size of the lie that is detrimental to it, or just the lie, any lie at all? Do you think that it's the size of the lie? Because I will straight up say, like, when they shift over with the tremendous gear shift into Gotham and Harvey Dent Day after that opening was a little bit disorienting. Like, I was like, what? Wait, what? No, like, it came down too quick for me. You know, like, at least in Dark Knight, you have that amazing opening, and then you see Batman show up and sort of like, just wipe the floor with a ton of people. And so, like, there's this sort of denouement moment from the opening in Dark Knight, whereas there's just this sudden lurch into a more introspective film. Did that catch you guys off guard at all?
Well, you asked two different questions there.
Yeah, I know, but like with the lie, but then I guess just while I'm thinking about it, like that sudden introspective lurch, like did that? I mean, I know for me, the bigger question that I'm trying to get at here actually is, did it take you guys out of the film for a second? Because I know that the first time I watched it, it was disorienting for me to suddenly go from this tremendous action sequence to this very quiet moment.
No, not really. Sorry to continually disagree with you. It didn't. I think you did a great job of comparing and contrasting to The Dark Knight, because you're right. We had this crazy action scene that was very tense and an introduction of a great character, and then we got to see Batman kick ass, and then we got to calm down a little bit. But with this one, I never really thought about it before, because you're right. It is a slam on the brakes moment, but in that moment, I don't think it bothered me, because I continually was trying to figure out what was going on with Bruce. Like, my mind was occupied while that was going on, so it wasn't so much like, oh my god, like the action has stopped, this is weird, this is awkward, this is, oh, the action has stopped, what's going on? And so my brain was still engaged, so I think that compensated for what you're talking about.
It didn't shock me or pull me out. I think what it did for me was that it set up that, again, this is going to be a slightly different type of movie, because Dark Knight definitely sets itself apart from Batman Begins, and this one, again, is setting itself apart from that. And the way in which it's doing it for me is exactly what I want to see, which is they took that second film and mined everything, saying, okay, all of the story elements that we put on the table with this first and second movie, what's a good resolution to this? And where do we need to pull themes, and where do we need to make sure this all fits together? And it really is, I think, to me, it was a masterclass in saying, how do we create a finale for this trilogy that makes you feel like you are rewarded for watching it. And part of the reward for me was the fact that the introspection and the philosophical discussion and the moral discussion of what happens if we build things on lies. And I think, John, the answer to your question about the lie itself is that we see that, the lie that Alfred tells Bruce is a smaller lie, right? But it also has a detrimental effect on Bruce Wayne. It shuts him down. And I also like the way in which they mention in this scene, that Gordon has been paying for the lie with Dent with his own family because he praised the man who almost murdered his family, and he lost them because he was trying to save the city, but going about it in the wrong way. And from the smallest aspect and consequence all the way to the very top of what this has created in Gotham with, we're putting people in prison under a false pretense, with a law based on a lie. I mean, it's just something that from the smallest place to the biggest place, it's just a chain reaction just ready to explode, and it does in the film. And to me, that was just the idea of talking about just in general morality like this through superheroes is, I think, fantastic because, our myths and comic books are kind of the American myth, are our ways of teaching ourselves things. And the fact that this movie was definitely trying to say something to us that I think is terribly important in today's society. Just only mentioned in the presidential election, but just a little bit important, the idea of actual truth.
Sure.
So, it's amazing.
Sure. When I watched this, movie and the entire idea of the Dent Act was happening, and then it was the lie was released, and then the look that John Blake gave Gary Oldman and Gordon, and talking about like your hands look plenty filthy to me or something like that. Yeah. In that moment, you guys might disagree with me, and I think you will. In that moment, I was just kind of like, what the hell does it matter? Like I was kind of on Gordon's side, where it was I might have even been taking it further than Gordon, where like John Blake was saying is like you knew even when they used the Dent Act, all these men are behind bars because of the Dent Act and because of you, and it was all based on a lie. I'm kind of to the point where like I'm kind of with Batman on this one, where yeah, it was based on a lie, but does that mean that these people did, like, the evil things that they did were any less evil just because they had a way to put them behind bars?
I think that's a great question, and I think that speaks to Matt's whole thing about, like, that's what makes this film so rich to talk about, because you have that sort of dilemma. And again, just like Dark Knight postulated the question about, how far is too far to stop the criminal, this takes it a step further and says, we've stopped the criminal. How far is too far to keep them in prison? How, at what point do we cross that line? What's interesting is I think you and I had similar reactions of, I have a sort of defensiveness of Gordon in that, because I think that there's enough distance in a sense. I think that watching the three movies close together is better, because if there's one thing I'm going to knock Dark Knight Rises on, there are a couple of things, there are a couple of imperfections I'd pick at, but one of the things is I think that it relies too much on the trust of the audience to believe that things have not been as good for the at-risk teens and stuff like that. Like in the beginning, it's talking about how just like Rachel talks about, like everybody says that the Depression is over, but it hasn't gone anywhere, and so there's this sort of world building step that's missing. And I think if they had built it a little bit better, it would have spoken to my defensiveness of Gordon in that, yeah, Gordon makes this morally questionable decision, but don't forget how bad Gotham was. Gotham was hell on earth. ruled by the mob as if it were an old medieval fiefdom. And Gordon saw like the one shot he had at cleaning it up. And yes, you can sit there and you can second guess and you can say morally it's not the right thing to do. But Gordon's saying, yeah, fine, but I needed, it had to end. You know, like you get the sense of like he's a guy who was so desperate for just a clean moment in, in his life, in the city's life, that he just took the first thing he saw. And it was a lie, and he admits in that speech, he's like, yeah, it's dirty, but basically we were so desperate to get things clean. We were just trying what we could do. So like, I think that's where my defensiveness of him comes in that scene.
Well, and I'm on the other side from you guys. I'm not defensive about Gordon at all. I'm completely on the side of, because how the Dent Act led to them basically taking away civil liberties of people and being able to throw them. And let's be honest, it's just Guantanamo. That their Blackgate prison is Guantanamo in this movie.
Sure.
Yeah, they're throwing prisoners in Blackgate without any due process or the due process that they deserve.
Do we know that? I mean,
yeah, that they say that about the Dent Act, that it gave them the ability to block parole for people and all sorts of stuff like that. It's laced throughout the film, so I understand what Gordon's feeling and why he made the decision. It's not that. It's just that they chose to not, and this is the thing, they chose to not trust the people with the truth. And so the moment that they tell people the truth, people have another reason to not trust the system, because even the system is dirty. And so this movie is all about, well, what happens if people get so fed up with the system that they're willing to just throw the baby out with the bathwater because there's no trust in it anymore. And that's what Bane is able to prey upon and completely throw everything into whack. Because seriously, I mean, if you feel like the system is corrupt enough, you're more likely to be willing to burn it down than you are to try and fix it or ever trust it again. And that's the problem with what Gordon and Batman decide to do. They don't trust the people to say, you know what? Yeah, Dent was a good guy. He just made some bad decisions, and that's what we all do. Like they put him up as a savior when you just be honest with people. No, he's not perfect. He did some good stuff. He did some bad stuff. You know, let's focus on the good stuff.
Well, I don't think that they put Dent up as a savior so much as they used him as an excuse to make a questionable law. And I don't think that Tristan or I are defending the morality of, bad laws or taking civil liberties away. I mean, Tristan, you may be. I mean, I feel like I know you better than that, but you could be. But I'm not. Here's a question I would come at with that is, yes, Bane uses that as his wedge to, break the prisoners out of prison and get Gotham all riled up, get them all frisky about everything. But isn't Bane in a sense an inevitability? Like, isn't Bane going to come for Gotham no matter what? If he is truly trying to, fulfill Ra's al Ghul's destiny, and Ra's al Ghul's goal was to burn Gotham to the ground and have the citizens go nuts and tear themselves apart, all for the greater glory of the League of Shadows, proving civilization needed to be, hit with a reset button. Like, isn't Bane an inevitability? And what it is they just basically gave him an easier weapon to use than the one he was planning on?
Yeah, I think that you hit on the nail on the head. You make Bane's job 30 times easier because you created a milieu in Gotham which is ready to accept the truth that you're going to give it, and the way in which Bane is going to use the truth to his advantage. Instead of, if you hadn't ever done that as Batman and Gordon, and Batman had been the hero and Gordon would have been too, I think the city would have been in an even better place than it is with the Dent Act. Because the thing about the Dent Act, and I disagree with you wholeheartedly, they have a whole day called Harvey Dent Day. The guy is like their personal Jesus Christ in Gotham. That's how they put him up there. And he's the Jesus for Gotham. He's the guy that was so perfect that we craft this whole thing around him and his persona and everything, so that when that false idol, as Bane calls him, falls, and people realize that, it tears the fabric of Gotham society in a way in which I think we just see in our own world when people realize how corrupt the system has actually become.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, in terms of the establishment of like Harvey Dent Day, I tend to mentally separate that out from the Harvey Dent Act, just the way my brain works. Because like Harvey Dent Day to me sounds like, it's like a Gotham centric holiday or so. It's almost like does anybody really think about like what Memorial Day or Labor Day are about? It's like, no, I got a free day off work, yay! But like so. Like, I do think that they use Dent and his name as a way to get the act in place, but that's sort of like quibbling over like semantics. I understand what you're saying, and I'm not discounting it. I'm just saying like that's where the mental disconnect comes for me. But to get back to that whole lie thing, because Matt, you did say earlier, like, and I've been chewing on this, with the Dent lie, we know its impact, and we know that, it hit everything. And Alfred's Rachel lie, Bruce specifically cites as the reason he can't move forward. If Alfred had not lied to him about Rachel, do you think he continues being Batman despite the Dent Act?
I think so. I think because he would feel like he needed something. I feel like, that's the one thing that I feel like if you read, and Tristan, I think you can back me up, but when you read Batman comics, he's always driven by something because, relationships don't work out for Batman generally. And what drives him is that need to be there for Gotham. Especially right now in the Rebirth series, Batman is really being driven by that because he's lost another Robin. Spoiler alert. And it's driving him to want to save everybody and do everything he can. And I think here, the lie that he is fed by Alfred helps him just emotionally completely shut down. Like he lost everything he thought he was living for. If he had just known the truth, he would have he would have been able to find something else to live for. But and this is where the idea, what Bane says earlier, hope, the idea of false hope that creates that pain in people, because it's false hope that he was given that he could have been with Rachel if she had lived, but that's not really true, and so therefore that hope actually poisons Bruce instead of setting him free. And I think what's so amazing about this movie is it's just scripture come to life. The truth will set you free. And that's exactly what happens in this movie. It sets Gotham free, finally, and it sets Batman free. And Bruce Wayne. I mean, because this is a story about Bruce, not Batman.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's right to cite that because Alfred specifically calls it out, where he says, they don't want your body. They don't need your body anymore. They need you. They need your resources to make a difference for, the people of Gotham. They don't need you jumping from rooftop. I mean, now I'm paraphrasing, but when they have the whole Rachel argument, and he's saying, they don't need you to throw yourself around at night anymore. They need Bruce Wayne's resources. So I think you're right to call that out. Sure.
Why can't we all just tell the truth?
Let the
Stop
truth
trying to
have its
outsmart
day.
John, I love your Kane impression because
thank you.
It is like if Michael Caine was 12 years old and dancing around with a lollipop in the fields of Britain.
That was the most backhanded compliment I've ever received, Tristan. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh
That's
my
an
gosh, that
accomplishment.
was awesome.
That is how I picture Michael Caine when you do your impression.
I think, oh gosh, I think that's the thing that I love about this movie, because Alfred is the first one to really realize this truth about the truth, and that we've got to try to, and we've got to stop trying to outsmart it, as if we can go beyond truth. And to me, that one phrase in this film was so powerful, because when I look at our world, that's all I see, is that we are desperately trying to outsmart the truth of everything and say, oh, there's really, it doesn't exist. But what Alfred's saying is, no, we need to let it have its day. And it is a powerful clarion call to our entire world and society in the 21st century, that no matter how hard you try, you can't outsmart the truth. And when it comes to haunt you, it will do so with vengeance that you have never seen before.
One thing that I really liked about that conversation was where it took place. I liked that it was in a hallway. It was just in a hallway, and it was a barren hallway. It was two people having a conversation, two people who love each other and care about each other, one who was willing to listen and one who wasn't. It wasn't in the Batcave. It wasn't in his office, or it wasn't in it wasn't outside. It was just in a hallway. It was very real to me. Like, it wasn't there wasn't any dynamic motion to it. There wasn't any extreme blocking to it. Like, it wasn't very theatrical where, like, okay, Chris, I'm gonna have you, move from point A to point B, once he says this line. It was two people hashing it out, and it completely altered the rest of the movie going forward. But at the same time, it felt like a very real moment, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And it was it was the last straw of Bruce coming out of that Howard Hughes-esque era, and like that was kind of the final nail in the coffin for him, with Michael Caine leaving, with Alfred leaving. He's like, okay, I am now completely shackle free from this old 8-year life that I had.
Well, and that's a great place to move forward, Tristan, because were you guys shocked when we found that out, that's, I mean, 8 years have passed and Batman's been on the sidelines for a really long time? Like, I remember being in the theater and just kind of being blown away that this is who Batman and Bruce Wayne have become.
I think that there was the Gordon trailer where they had they showed the conversation in the hospital where, Bruce says, and a wonderful callback to Batman Begins, where he's having it in the ski mask like he did have the first conversation with Gordon. And he says, but basically Batman wasn't necessary anymore, and Gordon says, no, you need to come back. The more shocking thing for me, the fact that it was 8 years seemed like a long period of time, but the more disorienting thing for me was Alfred leaving. Like, that was, for me, that was one of the most unexpected things about the film, was Alfred having it out with Bruce and then leaving. Was like, it was completely disorienting, because the idea of Bruce Wayne trying to exist without Alfred is bizarre. Like, it's nigh impossible to wrap your head around. And so that's,
I think that's why I really appreciated it, though, is because
sure.
Yeah, you didn't see it coming, and because we as Batman fans have been so ingrained, like Alfred has been so ingrained in our minds that there is no Batman without Alfred. There is no Alfred without Batman. They're practically conjoined, and they're always a part of each other's story. And so I think Nolan knew this, and to really have a disoriented Bruce, you needed a disoriented audience. And I think that was the best way to achieve it.
And it's interesting too, because I mean, this is the one place that makes, I think it's a really unique take on Alfred, where Alfred cares more about Bruce than he does about Batman and Gotham. Whereas in the comics, yes, Alfred cares about Bruce, but he he doesn't ever challenge. I don't feel like he ever challenges Bruce the way he does here. And I think that's just very fascinating, that Alfred's main goal is to keep alive the son, basically, that was bequeathed to him because of the death of the Waynes. And I think that's a really fascinating and a very human, wonderful take on Alfred that sets him apart from all the other Alfreds that I've seen.
And I think you're right to call that out, because I think that's what makes the Dark Knight movies, the Dark Knight trilogy as it's known, so resonant and lodged so securely in everybody's brain, is that Nolan pays tribute in various ways to the comic storylines and everything, but at the same time, he's not afraid to let the characters actually, to use your own word, be human. And that's what makes this more than having, an explanation for the armor, or Fox give a Q tour through James Bond's new equipment or anything like that, and semi-scientific explanations for things. What makes it really real is that Nolan treats these characters as human beings, and that's what I think really makes it resonate with everybody, and why people keep going back to it, as these movies are such a template for what they want out of superhero or comic book movies when they claim to be realistic, is that this really anchors everything just in the way that it treats the characters.
One thing that I really want to ask you guys about is your reaction to all of this. Your reaction to The Dark Knight Rises and how they treated his Howard Hughes-ness, his the wartime, peacetime, the 8 years going by and everything like that. I really want to ask you guys about this, because when I walked out of The Dark Knight Rises, I was disappointed. It did not live up to my own expectations. And when I walked out of it, I went to a midnight showing for a bachelor party. I was the best man and I was hosting the bachelor party. We were, yeah, exactly. And I went to bed I went to bed at 4 a.m.
They all had Shirley Temples at the bachelor party. It was wonderful.
Pin the tail on the bachelor.
I had a Hardy Boy, so that's what I drank. But I got up and had lunch with my mother-in-law and my wife, and they asked me about it. What'd you think? And I was exhausted, and so they thought I hated it. I was like, I didn't hate it, and I said, I was like, how I feel about the Godfather trilogy? That's kind of how I feel about the Dark Knight trilogy.
Oh, bite your tongue.
No, listen to this. So the first one, fantastic, marvelous. You can't imagine it being any better. Then you watch the second one and it melts your face off. You're like, how on earth could the second one be better than the first one? And then you have the third one where you're like, I mean, it has a lot of great points, but it doesn't live up to your expectations.
See, no. Okay, whole different conversation. We're not even having that one.
That's the thing, is that I like Godfather Part 3 more than you do. So that's the problem.
You're a monster. You're a monster.
but here's the thing, is that the main question that I want to ask is the structure of it. I think the reason why I didn't like it as much as I do now, because John, you and I have talked about this a lot, where I think Dark Knight Rises is like a fine wine. It gets better with age. It gets better every single time I see it. But I think the reason why I didn't like it the first time is because I had this idea in my head of how the structure was going to go. When I saw preview images and trailer images of Bruce Wayne walking around in a cane and being secluded and everything like that, I thought the Bane fight was going to happen. He was going to break the bat. We were going to spend some time with him being dejected and recuperating, and then he's going to build himself back up and have that final fight with Bane. And that's the way that I wanted it to go, and I didn't want 8 years to pass because that's a stupid amount of time. And so all of that was happening, and I was like, Chris Nolan, why didn't you call me? I could have told you how to structure this movie. And he didn't, and so I was angry.
Okay, see, what's funny is he did structure it that way. He just gave the cane earlier, before the fight, because the way you described it is essentially the way the movie plays out.
Pretty much.
I'll tell you straight up that the first time I saw The Dark Knight, I saw it with a friend, and loved it. I told you guys in the last time we talked about the Dark Knight movies, how I reacted to it. Loved it, came out of it, raved about it. This one I actually saw with Agent Bunn, my wife. And we were sitting there, and I think it was the first time since episode 3 that the two of us went to like a geeky movie like this on opening night. Okay, it was a big monumental thing, and saw it at the IMAX theater, which was even cooler. I cried twice during this movie. The first time I cried was when he climbed out of the pit, and when the bats first flew out, like I cried. Like I was like, this is so beautiful. Like it's everything to me in that moment. The symbolism of it, everything that culminated in that moment, everything that happened, right down to one of my favorite bits of small stage business in a film in the last like 30 years is the camera doesn't linger on it, but when he gets out, he picks up the ropes and he throws it down to the people that are trapped in there.
Yeah.
One of the most beautiful moments of stage business, period. But anyway, and then I cried at the end. Like I wept at the end because I finally got like a superhero movie that rewarded me to borrow Matt's sentiment from earlier. It rewarded me for sticking with it, right? It didn't give me this morose ending where I was like, oh, well, I guess it's important that they won morally. It gave me an ending where I was like, yay, everybody, yay! You know, like
Everybody lives.
Right. But
to quote Doctor Who, but
yeah, but in terms of like, you know, the cane and the 8 years and all of that stuff, it is disorienting in a sense. But I love it when a movie subverts my expectations like that. Like that is the way into my heart, is when a movie doesn't say, I'm going to play it by the rules you expect, but it says, I know what I told you to expect, but I'm going to mess with you. And I'm going to throw things at you that you don't expect. I will react so much more positively to that movie coming out of it.
I did not expect, and this is where I'm with you, John. I just didn't expect this movie to basically be Batman Reborn. To have, and not just Batman Reborn, but Bruce Wayne Reborn. Never expected that. The idea that Bruce Wayne would be able to hang up the cowl at the end of the film, to me, I never expected that, because that's just not what we expect from a Batman film. We don't expect there to be a resolution for this character that ends up without him dying. And so the fact that you have, I think what you were talking about, John, the literal rebirth of Batman, who, you know, has been thrown into the pit, into hell, transcends hell, comes back out even stronger and better than before. But it's not just because he's a faster, stronger Batman, but it's because he's the Batman who's going to step out of the shadows and into the light. He's going to stop being the Batman that the cops are afraid of, but be the one that is standing next to the cops on the steps of, you know, the city hall there, defending the city. I mean, I think that was the thing that, for me, that was so beautiful about this film, is that the Dark Knight found his way to the light. And he's no longer just the Dark Knight, but he really is truly the savior that not only Gotham deserved, but that it needed. And to me, that's where this film transcends the Dark Knight, because it took all those themes and it drove them home like a spike on a cross, you know, to use that biblical terminology. Like it was the thing that it was the perfect punch in the gut that I needed, that actually made me feel good. Does that make sense at all?
It does make sense. This is the question I have, because Tristan, I understand you're coming out a little disappointed, and then, you know, it ages like wine. Matt, obviously I understand your walk out of it and saying, this is fantastic, I love this. But there is definitely a more mixed reaction from the fan base than there was with The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight, you talk to anybody, overwhelmingly positive reaction to it. Dark Knight Rises, you will still find people who don't care for it. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there are people who don't dig it?
I think the thing with that is because I was in that camp for a little bit, like not long, but I was in that camp for a little bit where I was just like, this is clearly the inferior one of the trilogy. And even though it is my third favorite of the trilogy, it's still a favorite. I still like it. In many people's eyes, it is inferior. And I think one of the main reasons is because as great as Nolan is at directing, I think he and the screenwriter, as in his brother, make the audience make too many leaps, where there's too many moments where you have to suspend disbelief. And I don't like that. One major one that is coming to mind is like, oh, we can't find Bane? Send every single police officer down into the ground. I don't care if they're on training missions. You send every single cop you can in single file, and then we will find him.
They weren't single file. Just throw that out there.
Yeah, I'm exaggerating. Shut up. But they might as well have been, because it was so utterly ridiculous. It was so beyond the pale of this would never happen in a million years, not even from a movie standpoint. That's the thing, is that, like, yes, we're talking about a man who flies around as a bat and beats people. What we're talking about is there's several of these moments when you're like, really? We're doing this? Or like, really, we're going in this direction? Clearly the screenwriter wrote himself into a corner, and he's like, oh, well, we'll just send all the cops underground.
Let me ask you a question. The best time to commit a crime in any city would be when, I would argue, when the professional football game is happening. Yes?
Yes.
Trust me, all of the cops are available to do your giant mission at that time because everybody's paying attention to the game. So maybe Nolan was making a clever commentary on consumerism, Tristan. Did you ever think about that?
Yes.
I kind of like that.
I am just too much of a plebeian to understand. And also, like, you just like the stuff with Talia, and like the the stuff with the bomb. It's just, there were so many things that were just like jump points, and like not enough bridge points, too many jump points. And possibly the worst death scene ever in the history of film is in this movie.
That's not the first time I've heard you say that. I disagree with you, but whatever.
Find comfort in the fact that you're wrong, and then we can.
Okay, sure. That's how we're doing it. Okay, go ahead. Sure. Please.
No,
y'all need to take this outside, because Ruby does not like when you smash up the chairs, boys.
Oh man.
Okay. No, I can hear what you're saying, Tristan, and my wife and I had this conversation as we were watching the film. She turned to me and said, that's dumb. Yep. You're not going to send all the cops down there. I get what you're saying, but I also, when I'm watching the movie, I can understand the logic of the film, and why they do that is that Bane and his group have created a sense of paranoia in the city, and I think they count on the overreaction of those in charge. And that overreaction is this stupidity of sending all of the cops underground, or at least a majority of them. Because even if there were some, say you have 100, 200 cops left, it's not going to be enough. So the point is they got the majority of them down there. And I think they've created just a situation that, Gordon's not at his best at the moment. He's in the hospital, and Matthew Modine ain't no Gordon. So
true, and I would say also, Matt, that I'm glad you mentioned the logic of the film, because as much as people like to cite Nolan's realism, there's very much an acknowledgement on his part that he's not dealing with reality. He roots things in reality so that when you need to take that leap, it's easier to take that leap. It's easier for you to say that all the cops went into the tunnels, as opposed to, and it wasn't, there were at least 2 that weren't in there. 3, actually. So, wasn't all of them. You're exaggerating a little bit.
There you go. I'm sorry. 99.9%, not 100%. I apologize. I honestly believe this is an indefensible position. This is such a huge movie sin. I shouldn't say never, but I cannot remember the last time I ever said that about anything involving movies. About how, like, oh, you know, you have your opinion, I have mine, it's all about perspective. No, this is too much of a leap. This is a great movie, but this is a major failing.
See, it's interesting because the major failing that I pick on actually is the editing of like the opening act.
You always say editing. Like, whenever you have something wrong with... This is just an outside comment.
Oh, okay.
Whenever you have something
Batman
wrong
v
with
Superman,
the film.
I don't like the editing.
Yeah.
It's like he's George Lucas or something. I don't like the editing.
John, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong about any times that you've mentioned editing. I'm just saying that whenever you find something really wrong, that's usually the first thing that you go to.
Yes, it is, because in the very beginning, if they do not show Alfred... Basically, the senator being missing, and you know they show him mourning, and then it's the next night, right? You see Gordon on that same night say, "Hey, let's go find the senator," and then you see Alfred in the morning go down, and then see Bruce in there, and then you know they have the discussion about Selena Kyle, and then they have the next night, and I know this will seem strange, but I'm willing to forgive the okay. You know, 99% of the cops went down there and they all got trapped in the tunnels, right? And then what I fixate on is, why is Gordon wearing the same suit with the thing in his pocket the next day? Whereas if you take... Huh?
It's his winter coat. It's not in his suit. It's in his winter coat.
Oh, no, nobody changes... Oh, no, it's not. It's a suit coat. I swear to you, it's a suit coat.
It's his winter coat.
No,
I
it is not. You are so wrong.
Okay, if I am wrong, here's the thing. Just the other day,
Mr. Fall Fashion over there is wrong.
Just yesterday, I found a ticket in my suit pocket, not my coat pocket, my suit pocket from 3 years ago.
My point is this, is that if you simply excise the I think it's 2 shots of Alfred in daylight going down to the Batcave, then the logic of the film, I guess, in a sense, makes more sense. And then you have the too quick nighttime that falls during an incredible action sequence where he's chasing everybody on the motorcycle, right? On the Bat Pod is chasing everybody on their motorcycles. And so that's the sort of stuff that I harp on with this film in particular, as opposed to all of the cops going down, because that has a sort of consistency of everybody's at the football game. We don't need everybody, you know, patrolling the streets, so send in a ton of people down to the caves or the tunnels. Okay,
I got a couple things to weigh in here. I just looked up the screenshots while you were talking, so I Googled that for you guys, so I could prove Tristan right. John, you're wrong. I'm sorry. He is wearing the same coat that he was wearing when he leaves the party. So there's that. The last thing I will say on the cops going down there is that I think that this is also the progression from the last film. We had the conversation about the comic bookiness. There is some comic bookiness here in this film, and part of that comic bookiness is the comic book logic of we send all the cops in because that's just what you do in a comic book film. And I think, for better or worse, maybe Nolan had created a milieu for himself that, oh, you're smarter than that. You don't have to resort to that kind of thing. We're still making a comic book film. So this may be the greatest comic book movie franchise of all times, at least trilogy-wise, which I don't think you can argue against that. But still, that's my last thing to say about that. But we got to move on because we got this movie is just like you said, John, this movie is like fine wine where you just keep sipping on these things. And one of the things I want to touch on just real quickly is something that they talk about with Gordon at this party, the wartime and the peacetime. And is there really a difference between those two? Because I'm thinking that it's the complacency of Gotham getting back to the saying, "Oh, well, everything's fine, man. We don't need this wartime conciliary." we basically we just
Jenko. Jenko
Yeah.
Abundando would have solved Gotham's problems.
Exactly. We what we need is we need somebody who's cool with it. That we're all cool now. We don't need this guy who's all worried about crimes that really aren't happening. And I just thought that was so interesting because it seems like even in our own world, it's when we get complacent that bad things happen. Like constant vigilance. Shouldn't that just be a thing?
Well, I feel like with the wartime peacetime thing, I feel like when you look at the themes of each movie, and what did Nolan say? The Batman Begins is fear, The Dark Knight is chaos, and The Dark Knight Rises is pain. Those are the main themes of each movie, according to Nolan. And I feel like in order to have the most pain, or at least the most reaction to pain, is for it to come in peacetime, come when you're least expecting it. And where the Joker thrived in chaos in an already chaotic Gotham where he was trying to push it over the edge, Bane came in, who was, like I don't want to say the opposite of Joker, but had different purposes, where he came in to bring the killing blow, the killing strike to Gotham in its peacetime, to give that final painful blow. And I think that's why I like that Bane is so different from Joker, because you cannot top the Joker in The Dark Knight. So that's why you have to do something different.
Okay, as a question, because you mentioned the Joker, I think that a lot of people were bothered by the fact that there was no, at least, reference to the Joker in this. I know that I've spoken with a number of people where they've cited that as one of the problems they have with the film. Do you think that Nolan made the right decision in making this Joker-free? Or do you think that he should have had some sort of passing reference to the Joker? Like somebody made these fake storyboards up at one point showing everybody being set free from Blackgate.
Yeah.
And you just see the Joker's smile, and but his gate doesn't open.
Everyone thought that was real too. It was.
Of course they did. It's the internet. Of course it's real.
Hey.
Do you guys think that he made the right decision?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mainly from an outside perspective.
We are all in agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Joker's fingerprints are all over the film, whether you say his name or not, because it's all about what happened to Dent, which is leading into all of this, and Joker is responsible for that. You don't need to say his name for me to remember that. That's pandering to the audience for no good reason. And I think Christopher Nolan, obviously, contextually outside the film, we're respecting what happened to Heath Ledger. And there is nothing wrong with that. And if you have a problem with that, you have a problem with me. Because that's just ridiculous. I mean, come on. We can respect something that happened outside of film and still do the film justice. And this film does what happened in The Dark Knight complete justice, because everything that's happening in this movie is directly related to the second movie and the first movie, because every plot point comes from that. So if you have a problem with that, I think you're just being nitpicky for no good reason.
Even Nolan himself said that he shot so much Joker footage that he could have had a Joker plot in The Dark Knight Rises. And he says, he's like, I could, but I won't. And I think if he did anything remotely close to showcasing Heath Ledger, even in passing, people would have complained. People would have said, oh, you're being opportunistic, you're trying to capitalize off of his death, and blah, 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 blah. And so I feel like even though it would have been cool, like if Heath Ledger was still alive, of course we would have a reference to Joker in the third one. We would have, even if it was just a passing one, like John, like you were talking about, even if somebody just mentioned his name, that would have happened. But because Heath Ledger died, Chris Nolan compensated. Did he overcompensate? Maybe, but I don't think so.
But see, I think that the compensation, the thing is, I agree with you guys. Like, I think he made the right decision to make this its own film. Matt, you're right. It deals with the repercussions of The Dark Knight. But at the same time, mentioning Ledger isn't necessary. Or, the Joker, because we will all think of Ledger. So I think that there is like he's in sort of like a Kobayashi Maru scenario where, you know, damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, and he makes the right decision, you know, I think that the decision to make it 8 years later helps provide that distance to say that's why nobody's talking about the Joker anymore, is because it's 8 years later, right in your own head, whatever would have happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it gives this film its own identity by not having the Joker in it. If you have any reference to the Joker, it's sort of like with The Force Awakens, where they said, you know, we kept pushing Luke back in the script because as soon as he came in, it was his movie. So I think that probably the Joker, if he's mentioned at any point, it becomes, people become fixated on the Joker. So yeah, you know, I think it's right. And I think that the 8 years, I think that explains why there's that giant time gap between the two films, is because it's believable that 8 years later, people aren't talking about him anymore.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there. I think that's a big portion of it. That's a big reasoning behind it, because then it would become his movie. People would be wondering, like, oh, are we going to see him? Is he going to use some footage? Any kind of mention, people would be expecting that instead of focusing on the movie. And also, think anybody who's arguing with us right now or disagreeing with us, think about this. Even if they just had one passing phrase where Alfred says, like, oh, well, you know, like it's so at least you don't have to deal with the Joker since he's been in prison for 8 years. People would immediately go, oh, he's not in prison. He's dead. Heath Ledger is dead. And so their minds would immediately be removed from the movie instead of having you focus on this world that Nolan created instead of the world that we're in. And that is good filmmaking because you're thinking about all aspects. You're keeping people engaged and not distracting them.
Well, and I think you said something really important, John, that these villains that are in this film are the Joker antithesis, you know, because the Joker is all about chaos and creating chaos. And Bane and Talia are all about having a plan so immaculately planned out that, and that's one of the things that I liked about the film and the villains, is because that type of planning was just as scary as the Joker's chaos to me. That they had every contingency that, you know, they had worked on and planned on, and they thought they had it all under control. And honestly, for all of the movie they do until, you know, Bruce is able to do his thing and, you know, just have that vertebrae pop back in and get himself back up to snuff and find his way out of that hellhole. Literal hellhole. So,
yeah.
You know,
all
I
you
think,
need is rope for a broken back.
Yeah, all you need is rope. Forget love. All you need is rope. And so that's the thing that I thought was really fascinating, is that these villains are so completely different than the villains that we had in the second movie, and that was very smart and a nice completion of the circle of kind of going back to the beginning with the same type of very well planned out villain who has everything under control and is, you know, I think it works so well. And then you add the voice. So, I mean, Bane. Nothing wrong with Bane.
Tom Hardy doesn't get enough love for what he did to make Bane amazing. Yeah. And I think that also, to speak to Tristan's point about Nolan always knows how to use the camera, one of the greatest things that he did was with the IMAX version of the film, every time you saw Bane, it was an IMAX, and it was such a clever cheat on his part because Tom Hardy isn't as big as Christian Bale.
Nope. He's like my size.
Lifts.
He's like, Tom Hardy is my height.
Yeah,
I am not a large person.
But by the way he uses the camera and the sound editing, it makes Bane so much more imposing. And I think it's wonderful. And I think that Tom Hardy finding that voice was so key. You know, it's almost like, that thing where you wonder where if they hadn't put James Earl Jones in as Vader, right? They found the right voice for Vader. Hardy found the right voice for Bane. Like, without that voice, I can't even imagine Bane without that voice now. Even when I see him brought back in the comics, like, that's the voice I hear in my head. It's
so distinctive, and I remember hearing a lot of people make fun of it, saying that it was like a hard to hear Sean Connery, and I don't hear that at all. I really don't. And I do know that I didn't see the prologue before the movie came out, like some people did. But apparently his voice was even more filtered in that first release, and Chris Nolan had to go back and refilter it.
Yeah, I remember specifically seeing the thing before Ghost Protocol. That was one of the things was I said, no, he should, I was fine with it. And my cousin was one of the people coming out saying, I couldn't understand what the hell he was saying. And I was like, no, didn't you hear? And so when the movie came out and he is so much louder and so much clearer in that prologue sequence.
Yes.
Like, it is stunning.
It's almost to its detriment, where you're like, oh, this is clearly Tom Hardy in a studio. Like, this is clearly him in front of a microphone, not in the plane or not right in front of Daggett. Like, he is clearly speaking into a microphone, and we're using audio that is not in the room.
Yes.
It was necessary evil.
It was a necessary filter.
No, I agree with you guys, because it's funny. Just seeing this on Twitter today, people kind of complaining a little bit about the guy playing Thrawn in the Star Wars Rebels series, that it's hard for them to understand him because he speaks kind of softly and slowly, and
they should hear his brother.
I don't get it.
Three seasons of Hannibal.
But I think that the Bane voice is fantastic, and I liked the twist that it's Talia al Ghul, and bringing that again full circle with Raj al Ghul, and instead of having him be in the Lazarus pit and living forever, he still finds a way to live forever through his daughter and all. And I liked that whole story, and I thought it was fantastic, and personally love that Bane kind of goes out a little bit like a punk, a little bit like Boba Fett. He just taken out by Catwoman, which is probably my second favorite thing about the film. I think Anne Hathaway. Let's jump into it, because Tristan is giving me the face like I'm an idiot.
Because you said this is your second favorite thing of the film. That is my second least favorite thing of the film.
I love it. I think she is perfect in this movie.
I agree that Hathaway is perfect as Catwoman. This is the fine line that I sit on. I think it's a great, funny moment when she's the one that winds up shooting Bane, spoilers, and saving Batman at the end. But I can also recognize that it's a bit of a cheat, because they, to borrow Tristan's phrase, they had written themselves into a corner. There's no other way Batman's getting out of that. And the only way that it's going to happen is with, somebody showing up and taking Bane out. And I mean, it's sort of like you could almost open up a whole other moral quandary sort of question, where it's like Batman's all like, no guns, no killing, no matter what. But if you shoot somebody, okay, cool. We're all right.
It made me think of Simon from Demolition Man, when he's pointing the gun at the guy who genetically modified him so that he couldn't kill him, and then so he just tossed the gun to another guy and said, "Shoot this fool."
Yeah, okay, that's a good call out. Well done.
Thank you.
But what I like Deep about pockets. It is that this is the relationship between especially Bruce and Selina is one of Bruce finding a way to help her redeem herself. She has been trying to find a way out, wants a way out, and so what Bruce is able to do is to finally give her that way out. And then again, it's not the Dark Knight, it's the light knight. Like he's become the white knight. The white knight that we all said that Harvey Dent was, but it was a lie. But Bruce has become that now. And he's found a way, to help rescue people in all sorts of different ways. And for her, it's morally and almost spiritually help her find that way back towards the light as well. And I like that she makes the choice to turn around, come back, and help Bruce. To me, it works because thematically it's working with the rest of what's happening with the movie. And honestly, Anne Hathaway is just brilliant in this role. I mean, when she steals the pearls from him and she kicks the cane out, and the way she does that so nonchalantly and snarkily and everything about it, it's exactly what the way and I think it's the chemistry that she has with Christian Bale and in the way that they play the role together. It's just phenomenal. So, and I mean, it leads to him being able to go, so that's what that feels like, which is probably the best line in the movie, if you ask me, because he finally knows what it feels like.
I wouldn't say it's the best line.
I'm just saying to me. I said to me.
It's a nice pull from Kingdom Come. I'll give it that. I really like that.
But I agree with you. I really enjoy Catwoman's redemption arc. I enjoy the fact that Batman acts in that way and pulls her along, the track of, like, I think that it's very much a relevant theme, even more so today, of the idea that people, because Selina Kyle is trapped in this idea that no matter what you do in the past, even if you change, even if you make your life better, people aren't going to let go of what is on the record. And that's what she's trapped by. And Batman, I really love the fact, is the one that gives her the means and says, no, if you want to change, you can. And you can, like, so there's even a more meaningful redemption arc. Instead of Batman taking on the sins of Harvey Dent at the end of The Dark Knight, he is willing to put faith into Selina Kyle and say, I'll give you the means to turn your life around if you really want to. And she does.
And that's what's so beautiful, because not only he literally can wipe away her sins. And I think that's the thing, is like, he can do that if she's also willing to make the turn. And again, it's a really Christian spiritual idea of being able to turn around and put your faith in something else. And that's what she does. She's able to do that with Bruce, and he's able to reciprocate what he says he can do, which is to literally wipe away her sins from the world, because both him and her are going to disappear at the end of the film. But it's also a beautiful thing because it also leads Bruce to doing the thing of carrying the entire sin of Gotham away. In the light of the bomb. I mean, so what's happening in this film to me, and again, this is where I geek out, is there's a movie that's telling a story which I believe to be true, but to the rest of the world in a way that they can comprehend it. Like it's a spiritual, there's spiritual truths being played out, and that's why I love this movie more than all the others in this series, because of what it does, and Catwoman and just happens to be a part of that story as well, and I think it really, really works. So, did you guys like Blake? Did you like that character of John Blake and what he'll represent going forward?
Yes, I do like Robin John Blake because of the fact that he is Dent-like through the movie. And then at the end, in a sense, even though he's the one that castigates Gordon over, you told a lie and, you worked outside the system and it's wrong, he's the one at the end that says, that basically acknowledges Gordon's point, where he synthesizes this idea of being committed to the truth of everything, but at the same time recognizing that there are times where you need to work beyond the law in order to get things done. And so I like that about his character. I like the arc of the character.
I like the idea of the character and the character himself more than Joseph Gordon-Levitt's portrayal of that character. I like Gordon-Levitt as an actor. I really do. I like him a lot. There are certain times when I feel like I maybe it's because I'm such a Third Rock from the Sun fan, but there are certain times I feel like he's putting on this much deeper voice than what his real voice is. And I know, like, we saw him go through puberty on TV, but anyway, that's besides the point. But there's just certain times when I was like, Levitt, you're acting like you're acting. Just act. But the idea of the character and what the character accomplishes, and especially at the end where a new Dark Knight rises, I was in love with the final shot of the film. I love the symbolism behind it. I love how they worked it in. I loved how they set it up. I'm not entirely in love with them using the Robin cheat. I think we would have been able to make that leap without them spelling it out for us, I think. But that's neither here nor there. It didn't ruin anything for me, whatever. But yeah, just the idea of continuing on the legacy, another person donning the cowl, which is very much in the comic books, and matching the symbolism with physical action. That did it for me.
Here's just hoping that he doesn't go the Jean-Paul Valley route of being the Dark Knight. So
I liked him, and I liked him in the role. And what I really thought was interesting is that he's a continuation of a theme that you see throughout the film of Bruce realizing that he's not so isolated and alone as he thought he was. And I thought that was really cool, is that there are other people that have had experiences like you, Bruce. You're not really special, and him realizing that. And I think putting his faith and trust in other people. And that's one of the things that I think is beautiful about the movie, is that Blake is a part of Batman fully opening up to the world in a way that he never has before. And really, and you don't see it a lot in the comics. They've done it a little bit more in Rebirth now, where Batman is beginning to trust more people in his life, not just Alfred, but or like a Superman, but other people in the Bat universe. And I thought it really worked. I liked the story that they told with him.
I agree. I think that one of the most poetic parts of the ending, though, as we get to the end of the film and everything, is that plaque at the end where it talks about, that the home has been given over to, be basically a home for orphans dedicated to the memory of Thomas and Martha Wayne. I think that speaks to, there was no way to force Bruce to, in your words, Matt, trust other people. But when he does, he's doing something that is so, he's answering a personal call to duty about everything that is, larger than any mandate he could receive from anybody else. Like it's this validation of Alfred's idea all the way at the beginning of the film that they don't need your body anymore. They need your resources. And this idea that you can't force anybody to, give to the poor or help the less fortunate. But Bruce Wayne comes to a realization at the end that the material things truly are something that he can let go of and move on from. Although obviously he keeps a small stipend for himself to go living in Italy later.
Well,
but
yeah,
everybody needs a little bit.
And
of
it's totally in my headcanon that they're able to prove that there was foul doing at the Gotham's stock exchange, and then Alfred gets all that money back, and then he gets to live a life of luxury.
Yes.
Because I mean, like it's crazy, right? That like Bruce doubled down on the same day that Bane did something at the stock exchange. I mean, who would put these two things together?
I know, but here's a big question for you. Speaking of Alfred, with the money and everything, I haven't yet tried it, but I will someday. Has anybody tried the drink that Alfred mentions that he drinks while he's in Italy?
I have not.
Do they make a Capri Sun version?
The two of you. The two of you.
Hey,
What am I gonna
I
do?
would drink it. You know that, John.
I know. I
I'm-
got to figure out how to make one, and then I will mail it to you.
Yeah, do that. Okay, so there are just a couple more things. And one of the things that really strikes me about this movie is that it was so relevant when it came out because the whole Occupy Wall Street thing was happening. And this film, it just seemed to mirror that with the way in which Nolan was using Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, the French Revolution idea, and really kind of seeing that happen. I mean, Crane is literally on a barricade, a French barricade, basically sentencing people to death for no good reason, just because they don't like them, just like the French Revolution. But what shocked me watching this was just how so relevant it still is. And that great cinema has a way of transcending just one time and space to continue onward. And to me, when the people become the mob is a big part of Bane's plan, and it's just as relevant now as it was then.
Yeah, I think this movie is incredibly relevant, and that's a sign of a good film to be continually relevant. But it's also a bad sign of the times that it is still relevant.
Yeah.
I think I like this movie. As I said before, I think it only improves with age, and it only gets better every single time I watch it. And it's like there's a lot of movies that that when I saw it the first time I was disappointed, and it had to grow on me. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I'm not going to let John movie shame me for not liking it the first time I saw it.
What did I do? what? Come on, man. What? You keep taking shots at me. What did I do to you? Come on. But I will movie shame you because I both loved it when I came out, and I also say that it has gotten better with time. I think that the theme of it is eternally relevant because there's this question of opportunism on Bane's part, and we've talked about how it all ties together and everything, and they gave him an easier weapon through the lie, but this sort of simmering discontent in Gotham exists, and what happens when this simmering discontent is focused onto somebody who wants to be a leader who has no interest in the common good so much as just blowing everything to smithereens. Like it's sort of it's relevant now. It's relevant back at the fall of Rome. It's relevant during when the British Empire is going through its own catharsis. Yeah, it's an interesting philosophical question of how do you guard against the person who comes along? How do you guard against Stalin taking advantage of the Bolshevik Revolution, which was problematic at best, but at least altruistic in its motivations at the beginning? How do you guard against, Bane is Stalin? How do you guard against somebody coming in and saying, yeah, I know you're all disaffected, and I know that the revolution has started, so let's make it even bloodier. So I think that's what keeps it eternal.
I think that this is one of those things where a movie just it can say something in its time, and it just continues to transcend. In the same way, John, that we talk about, especially on 602 Club, Star Wars episodes, or we'll talk about them, especially on Aggressive Negotiations, the way that the prequels continue to become more and more important with the storyline that they're telling in our day and age. And like you said, Tristan, it's kind of sad that that's happening. It would actually be nice if this movie was actually less relevant than it is, but unfortunately it's not. And so hopefully as you're listening to this, you can kind of go back and watch it and, I don't know, be inspired to make a change for the light the same way that Bruce does, which leads me to my final question for you guys before we rate this. Do you like the end of Bruce and Selina sitting there in Italy?
I do. I like that it's he finds some peace, and more importantly, that Alfred knows that he finds some peace. That's the key thing for me, is that if Alfred was in Gotham thinking that Bruce was still dead, and we, the audience, saw Bruce run around Italy with Selena, I'd be like, send him a letter, do something, let him know, like, so he's not like sobbing every single night saying that he failed the Waynes. And so that was the most important thing for me in that scene. And I like that he found peace. I like that he moved on, but that Batman, or at least some version of Batman, will continue to live on. And we, John, I don't know if you know this, but comic books are the perpetual second act. And
really?
Yeah.
What? What? I've only ever heard that on one show.
That's stunning. You've caught me off guard.
And so
go on.
And so we can't imagine a world where Bruce retires, I guess, except for Batman Beyond. But ignore that. Ignore the Batman Beyond thing. But in Batman Beyond, he still passes the torch, and we see him mentor. And in this one, we don't see him mentor, but that's okay. But that's the beauty of this trilogy, is that it's not ongoing like Marvel. It's not ongoing like the Avengers or anything like that. And I'm not knocking Marvel in the least at all. I'm not. But with this one, it has a very distinct 3-part structure, a 3-act structure, a beginning, a middle, and end. In order to really tell this story, we needed an ending to Bruce's story. And Nolan understood that this is not like the perpetual second act. This is Bruce's final act, or I should say, Batman's final act. And it'll live on if you want to perceive a perpetual second act in comic bookiness, it'll live on in Nightwing or something like that. And so that is very exciting to me. And so that is why I liked it.
I love the ending. Like I said earlier, I cried at the ending because I was expecting the sad, melancholy ending, and instead I got Bruce's resolution, and that I wanted it. I wanted it so bad, and I got it. And it almost felt like Christopher Nolan sitting down next to me, putting his arm around me and saying, "Yeah, it's over, John, but it's okay. It's okay. We're all right." And I'm like, "Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that." And I love the ending. I think everything is great about the ending, and I can't really add on to anything except to say that I will say that how it should have ended had a wonderful treatment for the ending. If anybody has not seen that yet, it's pretty funny. But yeah, I really, I can't really add on to anything you said, Tristan, except to say that emotionally speaking, the ending is very satisfying, but there's a part of me that wonders, would it have been even more fun? Like at the end of Inception, with the top spinning, I laughed out loud in the audience. There were people I heard groaning, and I was laughing, and I said, "Yes, you beautiful son of a gun, you did it." I almost wonder if it would have been even better if you had seen Alfred sit down, in Italy to his expensive drink, and look out at the audience the way he does now, and then you hear the Batman cue, and he smiles, and he gets up and walks away, and you're left to wonder, was Nolan just acknowledging the audience and giving us a bow like the end of Titanic? Or was he saying that Alfred finally saw Bruce move on? There are arguments for both.
Well, I think people still perceived it that way. Like, Nolan had to actually go to the press and say, "No, this is the real ending. Like, there is no ambiguity," because a huge faction of the fan base was still so affected by the ending of Inception. They're like, no, it's just a daydream, man. Alfred was hallucinating. Yeah, no.
I thought the language of the end, the visual language of the ending was very explicit.
It is very explicit.
He saw
but
Bruce.
Just the other day, oh my God, people. Just the other day, somebody posted a GIF set of the funeral scene and Alfred is there. He's looking at the gravesite, and someone posted it underneath and said, if you look closely, he's not actually apologizing to Bruce Wayne. He's actually apologizing to Tom and Martha for failing them. And they said it like it was some grand revelation. And I'm like, oh yeah, I saw the movie too. You know, like
right. It's like
when you mention the visual language, it's explicit, it's clear. There is no ambiguity, but people will still want to be special. People will want to say, I'm the smart one, you're the dumb one, and that's why I saw it and you didn't.
I don't get that, because I feel like if I saw the movie and Bruce and Selina are sitting there at the table having a drink and they acknowledge each other, Alfred and Bruce, and then the director comes out and explicitly tells me, should I argue with the director who should know best what he intended for that to mean? So all that aside, I love the ending. I'm right there with both of you guys, because I think, because Nolan is specifically making a trilogy, he does complete the story. And it gives us that resolution, like you said, John, that you do want for this character, which I do care about. People say that Nolan's cold and he doesn't do enough emotion, but I care about this character. And part of that is just because I care about Batman when I see him on screen. But the other part is that I think that the storyline, especially the introspection and the pain that Bruce has been going through in this film and throughout the others, all piles up to the point where when he, steps out of that hellhole and he's coming back to save his city, and then he makes the decision, that he could die, is he going to die when he brings the bomb out? Did he fix the autopilot, all that stuff? That he's willing to give it all up, Batman, and say he's done his part and be okay with that. But set up somebody else to take his place, I just thought was fantastic. And what I love, too, is that, it's Selina that he leaves with. Somebody who understands him in a way that most people can't, because she's lived that double life. And so the person that you're sending him off with is somebody that will be good for him in return. So the whole thing, it works to me as just kind of a masterpiece, which leads me to ask, what do you rate The Dark Knight Rises?
That's a tough one, because I think that the philosophical questions that this one raises, and as evidenced by the conversation that we've just had, there's a very rich exploration that occurs thematically in The Dark Knight Rises. It is so close to being equal to or surpassing The Dark Knight, but it doesn't, because there are a few things that, as much as we have been heaping praise on it, do, for lack of a better term, take it down a notch for me. But that's quibbling over details. And so I will say very plainly that if you say to me The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises, it literally comes down to what I want to feel like at the end of the film. Dark Knight Rises, as we've said, gives me the ending I want. It gives me the ending I need. For this whole story, I love the scenes with Bane. I adore them. I think that they're amazing. I love the fight at the end. Even the line that everybody makes fun of. No, I came here to stop you. That's your comeback, really? But like, if you're forcing me to choose favorites, Dark Knight edges it out. But Dark Knight Rises is a wonderful film, and I love it. So that's just where I come down.
With me, as I said earlier in the podcast, I was disappointed with it the first time I saw it, but then the more I watched it, the more I fell in love with it, and the more I realized that this is a good film. This is a great film. But it is still, I still like Batman Begins above it. and I still like The Dark Knight the best. I mean, the Dark Knight to me, as I said in the last podcast, is the best superhero film ever made, and The Dark Knight Rises is really great, but there's just too many things wrong with it for me to get it close to The Dark Knight, because with The Dark Knight there was really only one major thing that I disliked, that left a bad taste in my mouth, and with The Dark Knight Rises there's about like 5, and so I just there's with that many things sticking in my craw, with Talia's death, the magical USB, the cops going underground, those kind of things just stick with me, and so I cannot give it that near perfect rating like I did with The Dark Knight. Now, the thing is, though, is like where I gave The Dark Knight like 5 out of 5 stars or 9.5 out of 10, I'm going to give The Dark Knight Rises probably 8 to 8.5.
This one hits every button, every Matt button there is. Thematically, what it's doing, the wrap-up, it is, to me, everything that I want in a film, comic book wise, and Nolan kind of ingrained that into me with his series, and it's why I continue to love his influence through. I don't know, people hate me, but through Snyder, I liked it. I like those films that he's made because he's kind of continued that feeling, and this movie to me is just hands down. It's my favorite film of this trilogy. I just love it. It is to me, there are some minor quibbles that I can have with it, but like Batman covering up a multitude of sins for Selina, everything else covers up any of the cinema sins that we have discussed a little bit, and it's a 5 for me out of 5. You know, it's a 10 out of 10. I hands down, if I'm gonna watch the Nolan trilogy, this is probably the one I would pull off the shelf the most, because, John, it's the one where I come off with the feeling that I love the most. But it's because of the thematic element that really hits me.
Well, I will also say that if I'm pulling something out where I just want to watch a scene or two, this one also gets the edge, because I love a good fight scene, and the fight scenes between Bane and Batman are wonderful.
Yeah, we never talked about that amazing fight scene underneath the armory. That, I mean, like, I can't get into it right now, and I won't get into it right now, other than to say, how genius was it to have zero music during that fight?
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah, nothing but sound effects. It's perfect. No, you guys are absolutely right. Well, as you can hear, we could continue to talk about this. I mean, we could go into all of that stuff. We can't, because we have lives. We need to get to bed. We've got all sorts of things to do. Thank you so much for being here to listen to the 602 Club. I so much appreciate all of you doing so, and I hope you enjoyed the show that we brought to you today. But the other thing that you can help make sure all the shows on the Trek FM network keep coming to you is through Patreon. Patreon is the way in which listeners can support the network to make sure that all the shows keep coming out each and every week to you. It costs a lot to do this, and there's no way we can do it just by ourselves, us running the network. So go over to patreon.com/trekfm and see how you can become part of our team. Just a little bit every month helps us out. So again, that's patreon.com/trekfm. And I want to thank our associate producers, Ken Tripp, Davis Grayson, and Norman Lau, for supporting the show. The 602 Club specifically really appreciate you guys so much for that. Now, Tristan, when you're not here in the 602 Club talking about Batman, where else can people find you?
You can find me also on the Trek.fm network on a Star Trek Voyager show called To the Journey, which I host with Charlene Schmidt. You can also find me on the Nerd Party network by going to thenerdparty.com, and I host a general geek show called The Senate Floor, and I also host a show called Nerd Nuptial, which is a show that I host with my wife, which I thoroughly enjoy doing because we look at married life through a nerdy lens.
Now, John, when you're not down there under the armory practicing your swings for when Batman comes in, where can we find you?
Well, you podcast like a younger man with nothing held back. It's admirable, but mistaken. You can find me.
Your
you can find me at Kessel
podcast
Junkie.
downloads.
You can find me at Kessel Junkie on your social network of choice. You can find me actually co-hosting here on Trek FM Stage 9 with Mike Schindler, where we explore the non-Trek work of Trek creators. You can find me co-hosting Words with Nerds with my pal Craig, where we get into all sorts of zaniness. And, of course, you can find me on my own podcast nuptial on a show called Aggressive Negotiations, a Star Wars podcast, who I have to be honest, I co-host with a charming and bearded young fellow by the name of Matthew Rushing over on the Nerd Party Network.
Ooh, I'm just all aflutter after that, John. You just talk about re-upping the nuptial there. I really appreciate that. But yeah, check out the Nerd Party and our show, Aggressive Negotiations. We have a blast. You can also find me on Twitter at MattRushing02. You can find me here on the network doing The Orb with Chris Jones, to talk about Deep Space Nine. And, of course, you can find me on Literary Treks with Dan and Bruce as we're talking about the books and the comic of Star Trek. And there's only one thing left to say. Thank you so much for joining us. And y'all come back now, you hear?